Hey, g'day. Welcome to the ATP project. You're with your host, Matt, today, and I've got my good mate, Bill Campbell. And we're going to have a chat today about all sorts of stuff, but Bill's going to tell us a little bit about the work he's been working on in regards to physique enhancement.
Yes.
Specialising in women, you were saying?
Yeah, so I test both males and females, but the majority of my work is focusing on female physique enhancement.
Yeah. So what we're looking about today is not so much supplementation. We're really going to look about the way you can manipulate macros using diet breaks and refeeds, and we'll talk about the difference between a diet break and a cheat meal. And we'll talk about the difference between intermittent energy restrictions and intermittent fastings and those sort of stuff, and how to cycle the diets, and then maybe even touch a little bit on rebound and the rebound weight gain and metabolic shifting as the different forms of adaptation, I'd say in comp prep. And we're talking mainly about natural athletes and that sort of stuff today.
Yes, that's who I work with.
So tell us, Bill, where are you from? You're based in Florida?
Yeah, so I'm a professor at the University of South Florida, and there I direct the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory.
Excellent.
And I've been there about 12 years. I absolutely love it. I get to design research studies trying to help people lose fat, gain muscle. I guess the way I like to describe what I do is I like to do research that helps people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle.
Yep. Oh, that's brilliant. And so we worked with quite a number of people. You were talking before, some of the people that well known to our market in Australia, and mainly our followers. ATP is an Australian company. And
yes.
So you mentioned you've done recently work with Lauren Simpson and Holly Baxter and those sort of guys.
Yep.
Oh, that's excellent. So most of Australian people, there are a lot of fans out there for those guys. So that's really impressive. So you also presented some data yesterday showing some massive changes into physiology associated with dieting and prepping for a competition. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I want to give credit to my graduate student, James Longstrom. He coordinated this study. And what we did was we knew that there was a lot of case studies on bodybuilders as they prep for shows, as they prep for competition. What there is hardly any data on is what happens after the show. So you're going to, you're done competing, and we're going to bring you back to a normal body composition. So we wanted to look at how fast do you gain fat if you do suffer metabolic adaptation, such as suppressed leptin levels or suppressed T3, T4. How does it recover? And again, there's only one other study that we found that monitored this stuff, and also metabolic rate.
Yep.
So we took 7 competing bodybuilders, 4 males and 3 females, and we measured them at baseline, which was literally at their leanest part, so about peak week or right before peak week, before their competition. Then we monitored them for the next 8 weeks. And most of these people took a fairly gradual approach to gaining their weight back. Mm-hmm. But the trends that we saw was very consistent. Guess what happens after a show? You gain weight. You gain it back. So everybody gained weight back. We didn't get them on the way down in terms of, we don't know what their off-season leptin T3, T4 levels were, but we do know that they were low going into the show, and everything came back. And when I say came back, body fat increased after the show. Lean muscle mass to a lesser extent went up a little bit after the show. And this is within 8 weeks post-show. T3 went up, T4 went up, leptin levels went up, and metabolic rate went back up.
So typically coming into a show, they're cutting the calories, and they're cutting calories all around. Are we talking about just cutting carbs or anything like that?
No, most of these groups of people, because I know the coaches that work with, they were definitely cutting calories, but trying to keep protein as high as possible while still losing fat.
Yep, and so during that adaptation, so part of that, well, the fat loss itself and the cutting up is an adaptation to the changing in those calories. And then over a period of time, the body starts to, the metabolism will slow down.
Yes.
And based on the calories in, the calories out will slow down. So we talk about like starvation mode or the stress response associated with dieting.
Yeah.
And what did you? And you said the thyroid drops and leptin. And
yeah. So I'm just looking at the data right here. Across the board, leptin went back up. T3 back up, T4 back up within 8 weeks. And these are in males and females. And with their metabolic rate, typically is if you lose weight, your metabolic rate is going to go down. So you can almost just predict that with weight loss, weight gain.
Yep.
The one thing that we focus on in my lab's research is when you diet, we do everything we can to keep your metabolic rate high. We do not want that suppressed. And there's basically...
What sort of thing?
Well, there's two simple things.
Yeah.
Eat high protein. Try to keep protein as high as you can.
Yeah.
And resistance train.
Yep.
Those two things. And we'll talk later about our Refeed study where we manipulated some of these things. But all of these athletes, again, they had a suppressed metabolic rate, and then again, within 8 weeks, going back to normal ways of living, like not living in a caloric deficit and these guys, bodybuilders, they're fascinating creatures.
Yeah.
They are type A. I have so much respect for people that step on stage because you're fighting the battle every meal. I mean, hunger doesn't go away for these athletes. I'm amazed and love to study them.
And the massive hormonal shifts. So it's a real thing. And for the listeners out there, we mentioned words like T3 and everything like that. So just the understanding of the process is the thyroid will release a hormone called T4. T4 usually converts through to T3, which is about 7 to 8 times more effective as metabolism enhancer. But if your calories are too low, according to your body, or if you go into one of those metabolic adaptations because of the stress, you'll increase a production of a thing called reverse T3, which is 1% the activity of T4 instead of 7 to 8 times more powerful. And that's how you can slow that thyroid right down.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there is as the calories come back up, as the body fat starts to build back up, the thyroid's going, okay, well, we can speed that metabolism back up again and enhance that T3, the conversion of T4 to T3 instead.
Yes.
Did you notice other changes in other hormones such as testosterone?
Well, we didn't measure testosterone.
Yep.
We did look at leptin, and let's talk about leptin for a moment. So leptin is, the more fat somebody has, the higher the levels of leptin.
Yep.
So if somebody loses weight and loses fat, leptin levels are going to go down. And leptin is very unique. It has like chronic effects such that if you have higher levels, you're less likely to be hungry. As it gets lower, that's associated with a drive to eat. So you really want to, and the perfect world would be that you would diet and lose fat and not have leptin decrease. But that's not what we saw. Again, that's going against nature.
Yep.
So generally, your leptin levels will go down as you lose fat. And again, a majority of leptin is produced from fat cells. So we noticed this. Again, it's not nothing here surprising. They had lower leptin levels going into their shows, and as they started gaining fat, we had a statistical correlation between fat gain and leptin levels going back up.
And with leptin, again, so it basically will suppress the appetite and stimulate metabolism. As a summary, the problem is with obesity. This is the first time I ever heard about leptin. I heard that if I give leptin to a fat rat,
it works.
It's just going to melt off this fat, and it's not going to want to eat. It's like the perfect diet aid. And I'm like, where do I get this magical supplement
Yes, I'll
from?
take 5.
And I research it. Obese women. What the hell? The best source of leptin was coming out of the fat of obese women. The problem is with obesity is we have leptin resistance. So there's
it's like it's a brain. It's like a receptor issue. I believe.
So their body just sees too much leptin. So you got to break that leptin cycle by burning off the fat, and that's once it's off, it can. Once the body stops seeing leptin for a while, the resistance frees up. All of a sudden it's sensitive again.
Yes.
So that's really important. So have you noticed that with that cutting phase, so the thyroid slows down, the leptin goes down, so of course energy levels, fatigue, that's a real issue in that sort of phases, isn't it?
Yes. Now, we did not measure fatigue levels, but anecdotally, as I speak to competitors, when they get close to competition day, very lethargic. They have a hard time sleeping. It's so instead of normally they might be fidgety and like moving their legs. Towards the end, show day, it's a little more of this throughout the day. Leaning against the wall. So their non-exercise activity thermogenesis just goes down.
And for those out there, if you want to know what it feels like to have a sluggish thyroid, typically the symptoms of a subclinical low thyroid, looking at dryness, dry skin, dry hair, slower bowels. You're actually more predisposed to bloating and constipation as well, so you've got to keep those focusing on those sort of things. Weird symptoms like lose the outside third of your eyebrow. You get really funny brittle nails and a lot of those sort of things. So if you're starting to see those sort of signs happening as you're going into a for those that aren't competing necessarily, for the average person, if you're dieting too hard and you start seeing these signs of the thyroid shutting down, might be a good time to review your adaptation. And is that where we look at for the average person? Is that where we look at refeeds or diet breaks?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. That's. I was just, as you started, I'm saying, like, we have some answers to these bad adaptations.
Yeah.
And we've looked at some. Now, my research lab has looked at the body composition and metabolic rate aspects. We have not yet looked at the T3, T4 leptin hormonal levels in this stuff. But ultimately, in my opinion, the reason that you care about T3 and T4 is because it's a marker of metabolic rate.
Yeah.
So what my lab does is we measure metabolic rate.
Yeah,
so we get the big outcome.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, you don't just measure TSH, do you?
No. T4, T3.
In Australia, if you're concerned about your thyroid, they'll only measure TSH.
That doesn't.
Exactly. It's not even a thyroid hormone. It's your brain trying to tell your thyroid what to do. And that's only if a TSH comes out of range that then they would investigate further, which is totally wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd want to be more. Yeah, if I could choose one, I would do T3.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how to use diet breaks or refeeds to adjust this metabolism.
So let's start first with a refeed, since we did some research on that last year. And I'll define how we used the concept of a refeed. Mm-hmm. So a typical person will go, they want to lose weight, they want to go on a diet, and they'll diet for 6, 8 weeks, maybe 6 months straight. They'll never ever take a break. So what we did was we said, all right, we're going to have, and by the way, my lab focuses on the kind of what I call the good to great phenomenon. So I used to test obese human population.
Yep.
Now I look at relatively lean people that want to look better.
Yeah,
so it's kind of this, again, I call it like a physique lifestyle.
Yeah.
I do study bodybuilders because I love to learn from them.
Exactly.
But my true application is to the person like my wife or myself who doesn't necessarily want to step on stage, but who wants to look good all the time.
Yeah.
So I learn from bodybuilders because they nail it. They're the experts.
Yeah.
And then how can we apply what we learn from bodybuilders into a maintainable lifestyle?
Yeah.
Because again, bodybuilders, they're not normal.
No, they're not.
So what we did was we said, what if we interrupt this cycle of week after week after week of dieting? And I can tell you right now, I am not a fan of that. I'm going to diet for the next 6 months because I want to lose fat. It will work. But when month 7 comes, you're looking at a suppressed metabolism and likely suppressed T4, T3, even though we didn't look at that in that study. And your muscle mass is probably going to suffer from that. So we said, here's what we're going to do. We set up this study. We had 2 groups, and this was in males and females. We had one group diet for 7 weeks straight. And the other group, and when I say diet, they reduced their calories by 25% every day for 7 straight weeks.
Yeah.
The other group, we said, you guys are also going to diet for 7 weeks. But for 2 days a week, basically the weekends, we're going to bring your calories back up to maintenance levels. So what they were at before you started dieting.
Okay.
So that means that the 5 days that they were dieting, they cut their calories by 35%. They had to cut their calories more so that at the end of the week, it was the same. It was an average of 25% for both groups.
Yep.
And what we found after 7 weeks, we found 2 significant outcomes. The first was that the group that did these refeeds, again, and we're defining a refeed as bringing your calories back up to maintenance for 2 consecutive days. I think it's also important to note that we increased their calories all from carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they maintained their muscle mass. The group that did not do refeeds, they lost a significant amount of muscle mass. I think it was about 3 pounds of muscle mass that they lost. What's the conversion? 3 pounds?
About 1.25 kilos.
Okay, thank you. And the group that did the refeeds they lost about a pound of muscle. So I'm not saying that they gained muscle, but they lost significantly less. The other really important finding that we observed was their metabolic rates were not suppressed as much. Yeah. So the group that did the straight 7 weeks of dieting, their metabolism slowed down by about 80 calories per day. The refeed groups, it slowed down by only 40 calories per day. So they maintained their muscle mass much significantly better and their metabolic rate. Yep. Same amount of fat loss. So you might think, oh, well, having this 2 days of higher carbs, higher calories, well, I won't lose as much fat. No, you lose just as much fat.
Yeah.
And when I talk about a maintainable lifestyle, most people want to maybe go to a picnic on Saturday.
Yeah.
And like in my family, after church, we always get pizza. I want to have pizza. And guess what? It's part of the plan. It's my maintainable lifestyle.
Yeah, awesome.
So I design studies that I want to live with.
Yeah, that's great. And that's in ATP science, it's the same sort of thing. We work a lot with bodybuilders, and we even, but our main market is working for the everyday athlete, the weekend warrior, the ones that want an ideal physique, but they want to be healthy and well. So learning how to manage these adaptations, because it's all the big adaptation game. How to know when to switch, how to know when to have a break, and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
So what...
And by the way, we didn't publish this yet, so this is not. So this will be published hopefully later this year.
Oh, cool.
So you
keep
can
us in the loop. Let us know when it's out.
Absolutely.
We'll make sure everyone gets a copy. With your study that you're talking about, how much protein do you do?
So we standardized protein in both groups at 1.8 grams per kg.
Oh, okay.
And then we split the rest of their available. So we started with, okay, you're going to have to cut by 25% on average per week or daily, and so 1.8 grams per kg of protein, that's standard. And then the rest of your remaining calories, we divided evenly between carbs and fat. However, we didn't stress if they had 60% carbs and 40% fat. We let them kind of choose. But we were very adamant that you can't go over your calories. So you have to hit your protein and you can't go over your caloric restriction. Yep. But for the most part, choose if you like carbs or fats. And that's, again, I think that's a wise way for most people to live. If you, like my wife loves carbs. Yeah. So we give her a lot more carbs while she's in a caloric deficit.
Have you noticed it? Did you look into the different types of carbs at all?
No.
Yeah, right.
We did get, and again, every subject in our study had a personalized nutrition coach. So they tracked every gram of every day of the study. So what we got was carbohydrate grams, but we did not go in and look at, was it high glycemic, low glycemic? So we didn't do that.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, so what'd you say, what happens if we have excessive protein? Or we went higher protein? You were saying there was a study with a calorie surplus with protein?
Yeah, so that's another study we did. Yeah. And let me just say, I believe that protein, I refer to protein as the anchoring nutrient. Yep. If you're going to plan a diet or your lifestyle diet, you start with protein. Again, this is for people who have a physique focus, if they're trying to look good. Well, let me just say at face value, I'm not aware of eating too much protein. Yep. I'm not aware of any study in healthy people that says that it's harmful.
Do we have to worry about our kidneys?
Not in healthy people. Again, not that I'm aware. Now,
unless you got some sort of urea disorders or some kidney
and I don't study that population.
Yeah.
And to be fair,
they're the ones that get into the newspapers though, that die from protein. They're the ones that shut down the industry. We found someone with a kidney disorder that took something wrong.
The same newspapers that say creatine will kill you too, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So with protein, it's and let me also say I advocate relatively high protein intakes. But if I'm wrong, if people can give me evidence, I don't want to give people bad advice.
Yeah.
Please tell me if there's research that says that this is harmful. I have children. My children eat a lot of protein, but I don't want to have them eat high protein if it's unhealthy. Yeah. So again, I'm just not aware. In fact, the studies that I am aware of, that it's just there's no adverse side effects from a high protein diet in lean people. So the other study that we did, we took aspiring female physique athletes. And what I mean by that is, at the beginning of the study, all of these subjects said they planned on doing a physique show, like a bikini or figure competition within the next year. So we basically said, okay, for the next 8 weeks, you're gonna lift in my lab, and when I say my lab, it's the Physique lab. And in all of my studies, we supervise every single workout, every single rep, every single set with my research staff. So everything is very well controlled in these applied studies. And in this study, and this study is published, we had one group eat high protein. We said you have to eat at least 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass per day.
Yep.
They actually ended up eating 2.5.
Yep.
The other group, we said you may not eat more than 1.2 grams of protein, and they actually ate 0.9.
Okay.
And we followed them for 8 weeks. And I also said, I don't care what you do with carbs or fat, you just, whatever. And this is not a dieting study. We don't want you to diet. The only change we want you to make is increase your protein if you're not already eating that much, or decrease your protein. That was the only change.
Yeah.
And what we found after the 8-week intervention was the high protein group gained significantly more fat-free mass as compared to the low protein group. The low protein group, actually a third of the subjects lost muscle mass. The other 2/3 just didn't gain much. I think another third stayed about the same, and another third gained a little bit. But the interesting finding was the high protein group who increased their calories. I don't remember the exact amount, but they increased by close to 300 calories per day. They actually lost a significant amount of fat.
Yeah, wow. So in a calorie surplus.
Yes, we increased their calories in the form of protein.
Yeah.
And they lost fat mass.
Yeah, wow.
And that is the 4th study that I am aware of where that's happened.
Yeah.
And these are published studies. And I wouldn't have believed that. If you told me prior to my study, oh, you can increase your calories and you'll lose fat.
Yeah.
I would have said, no, I don't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
Then my own data in my own lab, and I knew all of these subjects by name, I have the data.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, well, there were 2 other studies that showed this, so I get, and then another one came out. Dr. Mike Roberts, in a male study, showed the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So that, again, that's, you start.
Are they all around the same, the 8 weeks sort of time period? Because I always wonder, because to a certain degree, the calories in would determine the calories out, stimulating the metabolism and that sort of thing. But would there then be an adaptation when that?
Well, we did measure metabolic rate in that study, and there was no change, even with the increase in muscle mass. So metabolic rates stayed the same.
Yeah, wow.
And we got to remember the low protein group was resistance training, so they had that anabolic stimulus to maintain their muscle mass.
And how do you measure metabolism and metabolic rate?
So we use what's called an indirect calorimetry method, and that sounds complicated, but essentially, well, let me say the best way to measure one's metabolic rate is to measure how much heat they put off.
Yep.
So you put somebody in this secure, closed-off room where there's basically nothing in there but coils with water. And as they let off heat, this water that's circulating throughout this closed-off room would absorb the heat, and then you measure the water. And that's called direct calorimetry. That's the best way. Nobody does that because that's an expensive specialized room to build.
Yeah.
So what we do is what almost every exercise physiology lab does. We use something called indirect calorimetry, which is basically a complex word for saying we measure their gas exchange.
Okay.
So how much oxygen are they consuming?
Yep.
And the reason that works is for every liter of oxygen you consume, that's equivalent to about 5 calories of energy expended.
Okay.
So we put a bubble, like a hood over their head, we lay them down and we just measure their breathing. And essentially what we're doing is measuring oxygen and carbon dioxide.
Yep.
And it's a very reliable method, and it works great.
Yeah, that's excellent. So in Australia, again, at the moment, we get a lot of questions about, at the moment, intermittent fasting.
Yes.
And wanting our opinion on that. But I don't actually know. You try to work out what intermittent fasting is. It kind of depends on who you ask. It's
Yes.
What is intermittent fasting in your opinion, or do you know?
Well, I have an opinion, and I do get angry because, yes, if I ask 10 people what intermittent fasting is, I'm going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
In my mind, an intermittent fasting is an entire day of no eating. And people can say, well, that's not what I think it is. Exactly. There's no defined. There is something else called time-restricted feeding, where I'm going to eat only from 12 at noon till 6 or 12 to 8. I like that because that's a better that's a little more specific.
Yeah.
But to me, intermittent fasting is 24 hours of no caloric intake. In Australia, what when you hear the word intermittent fasting?
No, I don't know, because it's more like the time restricted, you know. So
Yes.
people just make it up. I don't know.
Well, that's two of us then.
A failed hunting trip. You know, that's about it, really. But so what do you think? What does it work? Is there any in the time restricted eating? Have you seen any data to suggest that that's a great idea? Does it reset any sort of leptins, or does it insulins or anything like that? Or?
So I'll say I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's what I believe, and again, I have not researched this specifically. What I believe is what matters is at the end of the day, how many calories have you ingested?
Yeah.
With one, we have to look at protein. You can probably eat more protein and still lose fat. So I don't believe intermittent fasting. When somebody says, "Oh, intermittent fasting works," I'll say, "Of course it does." If that caused you to eat less calories at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Now, personally, the way I live my life is, and I've learned this over the years, I'm not hungry in the morning. I used to read, you have to have breakfast. People that lost weight and maintain their weight loss, they all eat breakfast. So I used to force myself breakfast. I wasn't hungry, and I'm like, hey, this is what the research says.
Yeah.
Until you try to find research that tells you that eating breakfast is important. I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
So me knowing that I'm not hungry in the morning, I don't eat.
Yeah.
Why would I? Again, I believe at the end of the day, I have the most calories. I get pretty hungry at 6 o'clock at night or maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I kind of have learned over time, I know when my natural hunger drive is elevated, so I'm going to feed myself my calories at those times.
Yeah.
So I guess if we're going to use this time restricted feeding, I think it's a great way, if you know your own physiology, to determine, oh, I'm not hungry from 12 to 5.
Yeah.
Well, then don't eat then.
Yeah.
So those are my
really
thoughts.
Common. I mean, I was a naturopath for 20 years, dealing mainly in the sickness industry. So you
Yeah.
deal with a lot of people suffering with, chronic disorders and, fatty livers and blood sugar problems and cholesterol issues and all those sort of things. A lot of those people, you're trying to talk to them about breakfast and they're just not hungry. And then you realise they're waking up in the morning with fat through their liver, they've got high blood sugar, their mitochondria and full of all those unburnt sugars and everything like that. One of the best things we ever did in the clinic for anyone with any sort of insulin-resistant syndromes, that was allowing them to just get up, go for a walk, get some exercise, burn off some of that residual stuff that's oxidizing inside your cells, clear the paths, and then once your metabolism kicks in and you're hungry, then go and eat.
Yeah, so you notice that in your practice?
Yeah. So that's just an observation. We need to do some more studies, of course, to check that out. But it's a definite theme. But if you're not hungry in the morning, it's probably your body's telling you something, really. So if that's your intuition, do you reckon? Would you advise people just to kind of eat a bit later?
So what I advise people to do is, which nobody will do,
Yeah.
I'll tell people, and I did this with my students last year in one of my classes.
Yeah.
I have a class called The Science of Physique Enhancement.
Yeah, cool.
So it's an awesome class.
Yeah, that would be.
But I gave them an assignment. I said, the assignment is, I want you to not eat or drink anything other than water for 36 hours. And the reason I said 36 hours was I want you to get up in the morning, not eat the entire day, then go to bed, and not eat again until that next morning. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think that's a valuable exercise, and some people would call that hell.
Yeah. I was thinking hell would be a place just like that.
I think so for me. But what I think that does is it kind of forces you to realize when you naturally are hungry. Because if you're dying in the first hour of this, well, then maybe that's a sign that you should eat breakfast.
Yeah.
But I think people, if they're just habitually, I got to eat breakfast, and then they try this experiment of not eating at all, they might realize, oh, I didn't even care until 1 o'clock, and then I wanted to kill, every person I saw because I was ravenous. Yes. So, and again, only about 20% of my students actually, and United States is so litigious, I had to say, make sure that you bring a Gatorade or something in case you feel lightheaded, and you don't have to do this. You won't lose points. So I had to like baby it, but some of the students did actually do it. And I think, again, it's a good thing because then you're going to learn when you're naturally hungry.
Yeah, and reset a lot of those habits.
Yeah, and let me be, to be fair, I am not on top of the fasting literature. There may be benefits that I just don't know about. But I do believe for physique enhancement purposes, it's your calories in, calories out, with an emphasis on protein.
And there's a big difference between a physique competitor and someone that's really sick. Someone that's got liver problems, fatty livers, insulin disorders. They're right in amongst the polycystic ovarian syndrome. They're right in amongst all the bile defects and everything like that. So some of the stuff that we can learn from the athletes in that respect, in regards to the general population, it's not necessarily the same. So what'll work for a coach or what doesn't work for a coach may not always work for one of their clients. That's in a state of obesity. They're in that sickness industry where they've got all those hormonal adaptations and the leptins and all those sort of things.
Yes.
So you mentioned before with those having those diet breaks. So a lot of people will talk about cheat meals. So when you mentioned before, you said you had one study where they overconsumed protein and they could keep burning fat. And then you mentioned that with the diet breaks, it was focused on replacing the carbs.
Well, that was that. To keep our definitions, that was what I'm calling a diet refeed.
No, and
I have a different definition for diet break.
Okay.
So
what's the difference? You tell me the difference. A diet refeed and a diet break.
So again, people may have their own definitions. To me, a diet refeed, or the way that we define this in my research lab, a diet refeed is an acute 1 to 2 day increase in calories.
Yep.
So again, Sohee Lee, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she used this term that stuck in my head. She called it like the weekday diet. So you diet for 5 days and then on the weekend. So that's basically what we did.
Yep.
So that's a diet refeed. A diet break takes a more macro approach. And instead of just increasing your calories for 2 days, which is again what I'm calling a diet refeed, a diet break is I'll diet for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then I'm going to take a complete week off and go back to maintenance, and then I'm going to diet again for another 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'm going to take a complete break again. Now, it's important with all of these breaks, whether it's a diet refeed or diet break, it is not a food orgy where I'm just going to go crazy. It's still controlled in the sense that we're bringing you back to your maintenance levels. So in my research, it's never permission to have 3 milkshakes, 2 pizzas, a couple buffalo wings, which is what I would love to do. So you're still, to some extent, you're monitoring how, you're making sure that you're only doing maintenance. And on this diet break phenomenon, they did a study that was published last year in obese males. And what they found was the obese males, the one group did 16 weeks of straight dieting. The other group, they dieted for 32 weeks. That's how long the program lasted. But they didn't diet the whole time. They kept inserting these diet breaks. And what they found was that after the breaks, that next week of dieting, their rate of fat loss, or what you could also call weight loss efficiency, was so much better. So to me, the benefit of this from that study is if you can be patient with the weight loss process, you can feel good in the sense that when you are dieting, you're getting a much more bang for your buck. You're losing more fat during that diet. And if you're not doing that, when you get to week 6, 8, 15, it's hard to lose fat. You're beating yourself against the wall because your metabolism is suppressed. That's the other thing. Their metabolisms were significantly higher. So in my lab now, we just started this week, and my grad student Madeline Seidler is coordinating this study. we are taking females and we're doing this, again, in a relatively lean population. And it's a short-term study because, again, these girls don't have a lot of fat to lose. One group is going to diet for 6 weeks straight, and then the other group is going to diet for 2 weeks and then do a diet break. Then 2 more weeks, take a second diet break, and then they're going to diet for 2 more weeks. So both groups will diet for 6 weeks. And the main questions we're asking is, do we help maintain the metabolic rate? Do we maintain more muscle mass in these diet breaks? And we're not looking at hormones in this study. But again, if you can be patient, I believe you're gonna have better results. But it does take longer. That's the downside.
But so with those, do you think it's a carbohydrate, protein, or fat, or a combination of all? Does it matter? Is there with the ideal strategy for the average person? They cut their calories for 5 days. On the weekends, should we be focusing on increasing any one of those particular macros over the other, or is it just total of calories? Do you believe?
I have to say, because this is what my lab reported in our diet refeed study, we increase carbs.
Yep.
I can't say that fat wouldn't do the same thing because we haven't researched that. But if you'll allow me to just base my opinion, not on research, and my philosophy of optimizing your physique within a maintainable lifestyle. If you like fat, increase your calories from fat. If you like carbs, increase it from carbs. I'm in this for the long game, to help your metabolism 6 months from now, to help you have more muscle 8 months from now. If that means that you're going to increase fat when my research says we did carbs and that worked, I'll give you a pass. But the research would say, and again, there's hardly any studies on this, it looks like the carbs help the leptin go up.
It's interesting. This is the Diego. I interviewed Diego the other day from Colombia. He was talking about a paper that he did where they tried to do a anabolic ketogenic diet, to build muscle. And they didn't build the muscle, but they burnt the fat in a calorie surplus, and that was with the higher fat. Yours was with the higher carb, but you also mentioned one there with higher protein. So I was just wondering if one of the three, we should pick one of the three, or I just don't know if it's like the surplus of any one of those macros will create a better change than if we were to just have a little bit of each come up. I don't know.
I would say, as a researcher, I don't know. But what I do believe, and my opinion is based on the research, is protein has to be, and we're also in this study, everybody's dieting, it's 1.8 grams per kg of protein. We do not give you a choice on protein.
And you're talking about body weight, per body weight too, just for the listeners.
1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
So you don't have to be too flash with your, getting into DEXA scans to work out your muscle mass and that sort of stuff. So,
and let me follow up real quick, and I'd love to get your. You can help me design these studies when we do it. But under this diet break approach, where we're going to have people diet for, let's say, 2 weeks, and then you're going to take a week off, and you're going to diet for 2 more weeks. What we're going to do next spring is we're going to start designing some rapid fat loss studies. Because what we want to do is we want to start getting the answers to, when you are on a diet part of this, we want to kick fat or punch it in the mouth, essentially. So we want to start looking at exactly what you're asking. Should we decrease carbs more? Should we decrease fat more? What supplements should we have to help boost metabolic rate? So what I want to do is really dial in. When you are dieting, how much fat can we physically take off of a human being while maintaining muscle mass and keeping metabolic rate as high? Because if we didn't have those rules, we would just say, okay, we're going to starve you for 2 weeks. We're going to give you protein and you're going to lift weights, but we want to look at some other things. So again, what we're going to design is rapid fat loss while maintaining muscle and metabolic rate.
Right. I wonder, we might even be able to add an element in there where we can actually profile these people in regards to some sort of hormonal dominance or something like that. We may end up finding that for some person it's fat, for the next person it's carbs, and the next person protein. And if we could profile which person's going to respond the best to which. And I'm not talking genetics and just genes and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
We'll find that in different stages of our life and different hormonal profiles and that sort of stuff, we may respond differently to the different macros. And I think that'd be
I like that
fascinating
idea.
Study.
Yeah, like I said, I'll would love your input on the different ways that we could go about this. But Kevin, that is fun.
Yeah, well, hell yeah.
I wanna just take off as much fat off of somebody and keep the muscle on.
Yeah.
And again, another advantage to me of diet breaks is if you're just come off of a diet break, I think you're going to be ready to kill it. You're now motivated. Hey, I just had a week off. I can just attack this. For the next week or two.
Yeah, and it's some fascinating. Even I forgot what day it is, but the other day we listened to a study on caffeine, and they found upper body the caffeine had a major effect for fatty acid oxidation, but the lower body it didn't. And you may even find that with the different body types. We get someone with the big quads and the big booty and that sort of stuff. They may respond totally different to a stimulant like caffeine than someone that's upper body dominant with the more wiry lean legs.
It could be.
It's crazy. Hey, when you think about it, there's so many elements. In the end of the day, we're all different and we're all individuals. So there'll be a certain amount of what works for one doesn't work for the other. But across the population, we should be able to work out some cool trends. And maybe fix it. And I don't think it's just following the food pyramid. In Australia, we've got this crazy-ass food pyramid that they keep wanting to change it, but they've got to do the industry reviews first. And it's not good for the economy to change
And I'm sure that happens overnight, right?
Yeah. Decades and decades, yeah. So, Bill, is there anything else you wanted to tell us about? Anything other fascinating stuff? Or
one, I'm really thankful to you for having me on your podcast.
No,
this is a great honor.
We're going to do more of this,
Yeah,
I want you to be a bit of a regular because I love this because we have we sell supplements and we talk about ingredients and that sort of stuff, but we all know it's got to fit in with a holistic lifestyle approach. And we want to basically work out the ideal way for everyone. And then I think the combination of information, the way you're studying, like we mentioned before, your niche, you're saying you're very specified with your research, which is brilliant because we want your niche to be an inch wide and a mile deep. So you can be an expert within that field. You can't, and then you get to that point of knowledge where you realize there's so much more to know. You can't possibly know everything, and that's even within that really defined niche, So, we got to be talking about this for years. So.
Yes. Oh, and I would, with your permission, I'm very close to having 10,000 followers on Instagram. So
let's get you up there.
My Instagram is @BillCampbell PhD. So I would just like to encourage people to follow me. I'm just starting to put out quiz questions since I'm a professor.
Really?
Yeah, I'll put like a true/false question or a multiple choice questions and then give the answer and a little explanation. Because I do that for my classes. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, @BillCampbell PhD.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's Instagram.
That's Instagram. That's the only thing I'm really on at this point.
Yes, Facebook's too much talking.
Yeah, I've heard that it's just a lot of complaining, but
yeah. I like the memes and I like the pictures. Yeah, Instagram's the way to go. Well, thanks so much, Bill. And where's your college? You're based at?
I'm at the University of South Florida, and that's in Tampa, Florida. Yep. And on that note, if anybody would love to come be involved in this research as a graduate student or even undergrad student, I'd love to have people that want to help us, answer these research questions.
Yeah. Oh man, it's brilliant. Well, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely get you back, and we're going to be doing a few trials and that sort of stuff with you in the future, I can tell.
Oh,
yeah,
hey, let's bring it on.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
And someone wrap that up.